best of my ability,
preserve the Constitution of the United States.
the Constitution.
How Russia targeted voting systems in all 50 states.
Find weaknesses, as you said, in the voting system. Countries could target the 2020 election,
resulting ultimately in a vote that was heavily in the government's favour.
To take back control of their money, their borders, their laws, and their waters, and
The fake, disgusting news. Fake news. It's fake. With the fake news. Fake news. Fake news.
As the world is inherently becoming digitalized and our daily lives are filled with all forms of digital media that is filled with our data, I find it to be one of the biggest topics of discussion in our society and politics. We have laws regarding privacy and the extent to which the government or anyone else can gather and share our information. However, with the internet, it has become quite unclear.
Net neutrality is a term which has created a considerable amount of debate and controversy. The network access by users and by providers of applications should not be in any way constrained, except possibly by capacity. So let's talk a little bit about how one comes to the design of the internet. This wasn't something that you woke up one morning and said, aha, I know how to build the internet. So our problem was how to link these various nets together without changing any of the nets. The openness of the internet, in part, was a consequence of not knowing what applications it was going to be supporting. We were very careful to make as few assumptions as possible so that new ideas and new ways of using this technology could be injected into the system without having to change every single network that made up this gigantic global network of networks. I don't know that at the time we were developing this, we were thinking in political terms. It became more and more apparent that the internet's style of operation was the antithesis of what most countries had been accustomed to, and therefore opened a platform up. It's probably the most democratic opportunity for people to express themselves and to get information than has ever existed. Everyone should have equal access to the facilities. It's the possibility of discriminatory behavior that raised my concern. Some people have twisted that around to say, well, you don't want to charge more for more use of capacity, or you don't want us to filter out spam. Those are all false assertions. They're straw men. The term net neutrality refers basically to a non-discriminatory access to the internet. Yahoo and Google and eBay and Amazon and Skype and many others, they didn't have to get permission from every internet service provider in the entire world, and anyone was free to try them out. That's what net neutrality and non-discriminatory access is all about. The internet exists in the real world. It exists in a society that we all inhabit. It's essential that we live in a world of law, because anarchy is not a good path for civilization to pursue. I don't think the internet will contribute to anarchy. I think it will contribute to collaborative development of our civilization.
There have been unceasing attempts, even in the West, to control the web. During the 90s, we had the crypto wars, where GCHQ and the NSA said that we all had to give them copies of our crypto keys. We then had various child pornography scares. We now have an initiative in Brussels, for example, that would require all member states to require that their ISPs put in blocking services. And so if you're the government of China, you can say to Mr. Google, right, you censorship your search or you can't do business in our country. And that's a persuasive argument, at least for large and powerful governments to use. Now, there are some virtual center points like Google and Facebook, but apart from that, the communications are basically many-to-many in an end-to-end network, and that makes it fundamentally difficult to censor. We haven't seen attacks on countries' internet systems so far by other nation states, so we've got a shortage of examples. It is clear that as the world becomes more connected, there will be the opportunity for nations to do bad things to each other. It's possible by mapping social networks to figure out affiliations, who adheres to some particular disliked belief that people aren't necessarily overt about.
We have unbelievable resources close to hand, and we can seek information in any particular way we like. The moment you go online, you are recorded. It can say where you're going in that site, where you don't go in that site, what you look at, what you don't look at, what search terms you use, what documents you decide to display, and how long you're there, and where you go next.
Given that there is a fundamental quality in human nature that likes to share information, I mean, if you think something is cool or interesting, what's the first thing you want to do with it? Mm-hmm. Tell everybody you like.
The fact of the matter is that we've already long ago given up much of our privacy. The great worry that we have in the digital age is that we've already given so much of it up, both to private agencies and to public ones. We know already that private agencies are keen to look at the pattern of use of the internet that we indulge in so that they can target advertising at us. We should be very worried, I think, about the amount of data concerning ourselves, including very personal, private, intimate data about ourselves, which is now out there in the public domain. But one central reason is that this information is stored digitally. It's very, very easily manipulated. It's very easily changed. In other words, the prospect for misinformation, for corruption of our personal information, and for mistakes to be made about our personal information is massively increased by the fact that there is so much of it out there and so much of it is collated by different agencies. One of the great downsides of the internet is the sheer amount of rubbish on it, the sheer amount of misinformation, sheer amount of nonsense, because misinformation is endlessly iterated. It's a very inflationary mechanism, the internet. It amplifies nonsense.
The big piece that's obviously come from nowhere in the last few years, the hot topic of social media. I think that people are only beginning to understand what it might mean, and are we, aware enough, if we've come at this later with technology, of all the different ways that information is used, behavioural advertising and targeting. I think that where it becomes tricky is when it's not totally transparent to you, the user, or there is no way of finding out. And I think that that's one of the areas that perhaps we're only beginning to grapple with now.
The principal way in which power exerts itself is by creating reality distortion fields around the control of information. You don't have to control people much if you can control what they believe, and you can control what they believe if you control what they have access to. Mass media exists to confirm the pre-existing beliefs of the masses that spin themselves up in the rumor mill of the internet, where you've got people who are going around claiming that Obama's a Muslim, or that he wasn't born in America, or any number of silly things that get spread around.
The web's democratic in one way and distinctly undemocratic in another way, and I think a lot of the confusion about the political ramifications have to do with that one word having so many meanings. So it's democratic in that it quite literally delivers power to the people. It essentially opens up participation in the public sphere. Right? So anyone who wants to participate has at least the means to participate. So in that sense, the word democratic, the web has been this huge increase in the participatory logic of the media. But you mean the contending of political ideas in such a way that an outcome is reached and it balances the rights of the minority with the rights of the majority. The web is not democratic at all. Democracy is for creating a playing field and a set of rules for factions to contend with each other. So the web is really good at factionalization and special interests and empowering people to have incredibly loud arguments all hours of the day and night. But it's not at all good at figuring out of the massive signal that argument generates what any group of people should do. Newly broadened and crazily fractious public sphere is also going to become politically critical in ways that, we accord to voting or any of the other kinds of, formal government mechanisms we're used to.
audiences are seeing the story of the conflict, perhaps more than ever before, through Palestinian eyes.
What you might call fake news from established, highly regarded outfits like the New York Times.
That we didn't do enough to prevent these tools from being used for harm as well. And that goes for fake news, foreign interference in elections, and hate speech. And I'm sorry.
The assessment that COVID-19 can be characterized as a pandemic.
All those empty seats, thanks to a secret campaign on TikTok.
Macarena dance to spread the word. Thousands of them reserved it. You just got rocked by teens on TikTok.
Mindset any different? What inspired you to start attending protests was?
Area, not more than 2 blocks square. The presidential say protesters, these people are anarchists.
Breaking news, Facebook has just taken down some Trump campaign ads for, quote, violating our policy against organized hate. CNN
who study groups such as white supremacists say there has been a surge of chatter in fringe online spaces about
evidence of it all over the largest social media platforms on earth. Patriots, January 20th, 2021 is your Tiananmen Square moment.
Are now amplified by the internet, including social media site Parler, which widely spread false claims that the presidential election was rigged.
Looks now like the Capitol.
Since 2009, the use of social media and the internet has skyrocketed, and it has become an intrinsic to almost all aspects of our lives. We have seen the positive and negative aspects of the internet become even more clear as they are used both as emancipatory tools and means of oppression. Over the past 5 years, the digital world has become extremely politicized, from companies such as Facebook and Google under fire for data mining and the normalized usage of social media as political platforms. The laws online are being discussed as it is a new frontier which has allowed for companies to employ their own codes of conduct to their sites. The result can be seen with the ban of Donald Trump from Twitter and Facebook. Although to many this may seem as a good thing, this begs the question of whether our civil liberties to privacy and freedom of speech apply online, and if so, to what extent. Where do we draw the line when companies start banning other users or alienating certain groups? These are topics that will be relevant in the upcoming decade. Although the answers may not lie directly in the interviews of tech specialists from over a decade ago, we can still look to them for guidance and take that combined with our new knowledge and look to the future.